Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see all of you guys. If you don't know me, my name is Steven. My wife Jamie and I, we lead our church, Story College Church, and this is a church for college students. So if you're a college student, you're in the right place. If you are not, you should leave. No, I'm just kidding. Don't leave. You're fine. You're fine. We love to have you. We're really glad to have you here, actually. And it's good to see everyone. Today we're starting a new series called REALationships. REALationships, get it? The tagline of this series is how to have close relationships and keep them. From the start, I just want to make it clear that I'm not talking about strictly romantic relationships. Okay, today when people hear the word relationships, they think about their boyfriend, they think about their girlfriend, maybe they think about their imaginary boyfriend, imaginary girlfriend, or lack thereof. No, this is not a series on dating and marriage. It's about relationships in general. And through this series, we're going to be tackling. It's going to take us through the end of May. And I call this like our Grow Book series. Last year we did a Grow Book series on servanthood where everyone got like these little booklets. We got you guys into groups and stuff like that. Today's like the kickoff message for that. And then next week we're going to have people in like little groupings and have stuff like little Grow Books and stuff like that. You know, so you'll get the idea. This series is going to be very practical. We're going to focus on, not that my messages have not been practical, but we're going to focus on how do you actually get these close relationships and practicing this out. So through this series, we're going to be tackling these questions. How do I have close relationships? In other words, how do I get close to people, right? We're going to tackle how do I keep them, right? What do I do when for some reason or another the closeness erodes or breaks down? And I think these are really pertinent questions today. No one has to tell you that just the epidemic of loneliness that people are facing today, especially post-COVID, right? And especially with college students, I think these are questions that are very close to our hearts and questions we feel. I think we all want close relationships. I think we want, all of us want connections to people that are life-giving, right? That are happy and fun, and vibrant. Who doesn't want a relational world that is vibrant and full, right? If I were to capture that desire in one word, it would be the word community. Community is a buzzword today. Everyone talks about it. We have a great community. Even workplaces, our workplace is a family, but except we fire you, And so you look at that and you just kind of roll your eyes, it's kind of pandering, But I think that's at the bottom of our hearts, right? That's the question we're ultimately asking. And maybe it's not, like 50 people. Maybe it's not 25 people. Maybe it's just like 3 people or 2 or whatever. But we're talking about community. All of us have a desire for community. And if you want community, you need to figure out how to get close to people. And you need to figure out what you're going to do when that closeness gets threatened. And so today, I'm really going to focus on this first question. How do I have close relationships? And I'm going to do that really annoying thing where the speaker answers the question by raising more questions. I hate it when speakers do that. But that's what I'm going to be doing today. We're going to explore this topic. And hopefully, some of the questions I ask will be very thought-provoking for you, cause you to kind of look at yourself a little bit and do some critical examination. So to start off, we're going to watch 2 videos back to back. These are stories of how people at our church got close to each other. And you can actually find these stories on our Acts2 Network website. It's our network website. It's buried somewhere under the Way of Life section. So you just click that and you explore. I actually really encourage you guys to read that section. That section represents some of the closest, some of the dearest values of our entire network that really make us who we are. So anyway, let's watch those videos and then I'll come back up.
When I was a second or third year postgrad, I lived in a house with 10 guys and it was a lot of fun. But there was one thing that happened that really changed the complexion of our relationships. So one day, one of the guys, he asked to have a house meeting and he shared in a really open and honest way. He talked about some things that had happened at work, certain things that he was getting addicted to and how it was really affecting him. And it was clear that it was hard for him to share this. He said that actually he had been convicted by God's word to confess some of these things to his mentor, that his mentor had also encouraged him to share it with us. And though it was really hard for him and embarrassing too, he did it. And so we prayed for him. We felt like that wasn't enough. We also kind of had an intervention for him. And so we spoke the truth to him, expressing both how surprised we were, but also affirming our love and commitment to him. We took ownership. We suggested some guardrails and commitments which he agreed to. And we also all agreed to do that together in solidarity with him. One of those things was to get rid of internet at our house completely for a time, which was pretty inconvenient. In the subsequent weeks, our house was so full of joy. I could sense the burden lifted off of my brother because he was just in the light and he knew that we all had his back. I personally grew in love for him and all the brothers in that house. Before we would have fun and all that stuff, but also there were lots of petty squabbles about random things. But after that, I felt like we had much stronger relationships and that we could go through whatever challenge came next as long as we did it together.
So I've embodied the value of openness, but it's kind of strange for me to say because of how much blessing that I've actually received by opening up my life to those around me and sharing the mental health struggles that I've been going through. In a lot of the ways, I really doubt that I would have experienced the depth of healing that I have without opening my life up in such a way. Starting almost 3 years ago, I started dealing with depression after the passing of my friends. During this time, it felt like I was sinking into a void that I could not pull myself out of. Each and every morning, I could barely get out of bed, and as a result, I barely graduated from college. I struggled to do just about anything, but I remember telling the Chicago bros what was going on during this time. And telling them what was going on, I remember Stefan's son taking time out of his week to talk to me, to just try to get me out of my apartment so I didn't feel so isolated. I remembered being welcomed into the single bros home to give me a change of pace to just pull me out of that muck. Despite not really knowing how to help me, I can remember the many, many ways that these guys reached into that void to try to pull me out. And truth be told, if it weren't for all the support that I got from them, I likely wouldn't have graduated from college. During a time when I was desperate, these guys reached out to me. And it didn't just stop there. When I first moved to San Diego, I remember being visited by Noah Kang and Stefan's son to make sure that I was okay and adjusting all right given my depression and anxiety at that point. My mental health struggles did not just end there though. Despite not being in as deep of a depression as before, even after I moved and started taking medications, I was still dealing with moderate to severe depression. I struggled with feeling as if I was always the one on the mat being carried around by others. It felt like despite all of my effort, I was stuck and constantly in need of help from others. For every step that I took, it didn't feel like I was coming any closer to being healed of my depression or anxiety. And last year, I opened up about my struggles to John and Ellen. And during that time, they connected me with Jim Kwok on the East Coast. And I don't even know if Jim knows how much he helped me. To be able to meet and talk to someone who's made it to the other side of these mental health struggles. And just to be able to talk to someone who truly understood what I was going through, it gave me so much hope for the potential for recovery in the future. And that hope for recovery has really changed my life. Not to say that these conversations themselves healed me, but because of the support that I received from him and these brothers and sisters in my life when I opened up to them, to even seek the help that I really needed. And I no longer deal with depression. Through the support that I received by all medical definitions, I'm no longer depressed nor anxious. And that is something that I can attest to as well. I can feel that the changes reverberate through my life. And it all started because of the support that I received when I shared my struggles with them.
All right, so those are two stories of how people at our church got close to each other. I want us to just process what we just heard. So let's turn to each other and let's just share on what struck us from the video. We can share based on this prompt. How do these videos, not how do we these videos, how do these videos answer the question, how do I have close relationships, right? So go ahead, if you're streaming, go ahead and type in the chat. And otherwise, just turn to each other and just share about that for the next 3 minutes. There's a lot to say about these videos, but one verse in particular that I'm reminded of through these videos is Proverbs 18:24. If you guys don't know what the book of Proverbs is, the book of Proverbs is a book of wisdom in the Bible, and it's a collection of sayings, many of them written by King Solomon. It's kind of like Ben Franklin, Apple Day keeps the doctor away, except it's like a lot deeper than that, and they're meant to just make you think a lot about it, and so, it gives you like memorable pictures and contrasts and things like that. It's a really great read, highly recommend it. Verse 18:24 says this. Why don't we read this all together? 1, 2, 3. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. So in this proverb, we get two pictures of two kinds of friends, right? We get the first kind of friend, who is a man of many companions, and Proverbs adds this detail, he may come to ruin. So that's supposed to help you fill out the picture of the kind of person this is, right? So the first kind of friend is a person who has many companions. And the second is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. A friend who sticks closer than a brother. And I think the videos we watched really embody this second kind of friend, right? We get a really good picture. In the first video, with the 10 guys, they stuck to that brother who was struggling. They even got internet out of their house, for a little bit while this guy was dealing with some addictions. They stuck with him through their words of truth to him and the kind of actions that they took to care for him and to help him through all this, right? In the second video, we see the same thing. There were a bunch of guys who they didn't necessarily know how to help with this medical condition, but one thing they did do was they stuck with him. And even when he moved to San Diego to join our church there, they went down and they visited him just to make sure that transition was smooth, right? And so I think one thing one lesson we can draw about closeness is that closeness is not so much a feeling as much as it is a verb. Closeness is not a feeling, but it's a verb. A lot of times when we ask the question, how do I have close relationships? We tend to focus on the feeling of closeness, right? The feeling of having a friend that you can confide in. The feeling of having a friend who just gets you. And don't get me wrong, I love that feeling. I think that feeling is great, right? But if you focus on that feeling, you're not going to get close to anybody. Because what these videos show us and what this verse tells us is that having close relationships is not something primarily that you feel. It's not something that actually comes naturally, but it's something that you do. You have to do close relationships. They don't just happen. How do you have close relationships? You stick closer than a brother. That's the beginning of a close relationship. Having a close relationship doesn't happen on its own. It's something that is actually achieved with intention, with effort. Closeness is a verb. It's something you do. And if you understand that, that makes all the difference. See, I think most of us would agree, intellectually, that relationships take effort, right? All of us would agree with that. That's just common sense. But the problem is that if you look at how people approach relationships today, it doesn't seem like we believe that. It seems like we believe something else about relationships. If you look at the way that many people approach relationships today, many people take a consumerist approach to relationships. They treat relationships like the way they shop, I'm in the market for a backpack, and so I'm going to browse the backpack market for a backpack that's slightly waterproof, 2 sleeves for water bottles, TSA friendly, all that, right? And in the same way, people approach relationships that way. I'm in the market for a close friend. I'm going to browse friends for someone who has this aspect of closeness. I'm going to browse the social scene. And it's almost like a product feature, right? Give me closeness. And so what do people do? They meet a variety of people. Maybe they become a man of many companions, right? They keep their options open. They're part of a lot of different friend groups, in person and online, and they're hoping that out of all the people that I know, there's going to be one person, and we're going to really vibe, right? And that's the person that I'm going to get close with. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of friends. There's nothing wrong with being a man of many companions, right? It may come to ruin, not will come to ruin, okay? It's just that could potentially happen. So there's nothing wrong with knowing a lot of people, having a lot of friends, that sort of thing. But the underlying problem, the larger problem, is if you have this consumerist approach to relationships. Okay, I'm in the market for a friend that can give me the closeness that I want. And we might not say it this way explicitly, but for a lot of people, that is how we approach relationships. We're looking for a vibe. We're looking for someone with similar interests. We're looking for someone who has a compatible personality. We're looking for someone that I can just get along with. And we don't realize, but that entire approach is essentially focused on who? Me, the consumer, right? And for a lot of us, if we're honest, this approach is not working. We have a lot of people we know, but we don't feel close to any of them. And we experience frequent loneliness. To put it in the language of the proverb, we have many companions, but we don't have anyone who's going to stick closer than a brother. Now, the opposite to approaching your relationships as a consumer is to approach your relationships not as a consumer, but as an owner. Instead of passively browsing for closeness and hoping that you'll discover it in the social scene that you're part of, take ownership over your relationships and cultivate closeness in that relationship. Look around. Who's around you? Cultivate closeness there instead of trying to browse and keep your options open. In fact, browsing and keeping your options open might be the only reason why you're not able to cultivate closeness, because you never stick close enough with someone for closeness to develop. In other words, instead of being a man of many companions, be the friend that sticks closer than a brother. I think so many of us are so busy searching for that friend who's going to get that, whom I'm going to get close to. And we never ask ourselves the question, am I the kind of person that other people want to get close to? It's kind of like marriage. So many people are so busy finding the one to get married to, right? And they never ask themselves the question, am I the kind of person that someone want to get married to? Yeah, if you focus on that, just becoming the kind of like good husband or good wife and a good dad, mother, like in the future, like you'll get married, right? Most likely, statistically. I can't guarantee everything, right? But we just apply that to friendship. We're so busy looking for that friend that we can get close to. We never ask ourselves, am I the kind of person that other people want to get close to? In my junior year of college, I was talking with my mentor, and I was talking with him about how I didn't feel close to anyone at our church, which is crazy, right? Like if you've been at our church, you feel like junior year, you should feel close to people at our church because that's one thing you can do. Like you're over at people's houses all the time if you're in our rhythms, right? But I didn't feel close to a lot of the guys at our church, and it was because I was pretty active at church. I served in a variety of ways, whether it was college ministry or worship or any kinds of things, and I just didn't see any other friends that were doing the same thing, who cared about church and God and the gospel like I did. I remember my mentor said to me, you're not as different from your friends as you think, right? And I think he was trying to tell me several different things. I think one, he was trying to tell me, stop being so proud. Like, who do you think you are? He was just trying to peg me down a few steps, which is helpful. But I think he was trying to point out something much more subtle, which is that pride is exactly why no one wants to get close to you. Who wants to get close to someone who looks down on them all the time because they think they're more devout? You want to get close to that guy? I wouldn't want to get close to that guy, but I was that guy, right? And when he said that, I was like, oh, shoot. That's why I don't feel close to nobody, right? So I'm going to ask you something personal here. How about you? Are you the kind of person that people would want to get close to? Is there something about you that makes people go, Are you unreliable? You lazy? You selfish? Maybe you're stingy. Your wallet is always somewhere else when you go out to eat, right? Maybe you're too competitive. Maybe you're kind of petty. Or maybe when someone has just like a little bit of feedback for you, you get super defensive. You could be patronizing. Just because you're older, you talk to people a certain way. You can be extremely irresponsible. No one can trust you and lend you stuff because you always forget it, Maybe you're just never present. And every time people are trying to talk to you, you're glancing down at your phone. And you're never there. I'm willing to bet that for many of us, if we just stopped and then just tried to think for a moment, you'd be able to think about something that you're like, oh, yeah. Someone got really close to me, they would hit this, and I don't know what would happen there. So why don't we pause here, and I want us to process what we've heard together. I got a number of discussion prompts, and actually for this one, I would like for you to try to sit next to someone that you feel comfortable with. Actually, I kind of want to sit by age groups for this one a little bit. So we're going to try this, all right? We're going to have everyone get up and move, and what I want you guys to do is actually get the chairs into circles, right? And then talk to each other face to face. Well, actually, talking side by side is okay too. Studies show that when you talk side by side, at least for guys, it actually generates closer conversation. But anyway, we're gonna have like the freshmen here, we'll have the sophomores and up here, and then we'll have like grad students over there, something like that. And if you're just like, I just want to be with people I want to talk to, that's fine, right? But let me give you the questions, and then I'm gonna give us actually an extended time to talk about these questions, maybe like 7 to 10 minutes. Ooh, wow. Okay. Here are the questions. Just help each other remember what we talked about. What does it mean that closeness is a verb? How does Proverbs 18:24 and the stories we heard capture this idea? Okay. Second question, what is the difference between a consumerist versus ownership approach to relationships? And then number 3, have you ever asked yourself, am I the kind of person that other people want to get close to? What about you makes it difficult for others to get close to you? So I think the reality is that all of us have personal issues, right? All of us have things we know that don't work. There's ways in which we're dysfunctional, ways in which we're broken that prevents us from having close relationships with people. Now, just to be clear, I'm not talking about like baggage. Okay, I'm not talking about like your past hurts or your hangups and those are things. Those are significant, right? And those need to get dealt with a different way. But what I'm saying is that most of us know there's something I do, there's a way that I am. Maybe I'm selfish, really self-centered in some way. Maybe it's something that's straight up wrong. Like you lie a lot. You're a chronic liar, right? Or maybe it's more subtle, just some way you rub people relationally the wrong way. It doesn't even have to be serious. It could be as simple as like, you don't smile. You have a very intimidating face. And so people don't want to approach you because you're like really like scary, There's some people in this room that are like that, and they had to practice looking pleasant. They had to practice like smiling, and that's like the reason why you don't have any friends, because you look around like you're mad dogging everyone all the time. Like who wants to get close to that guy, right? But the insight so all of us have those, right? And so the insight I want to share with you guys before we watch this video is like, for a lot of us, close relationships sounds like a good idea. Community. We're in love with the concept of community. We like community and close relationships as a concept. But when you actually begin to take ownership in a relationship and you actually try to get close to someone, in other words, when you try to like stick closer than a brother to someone, you're gonna hit these issues, right? You're not just gonna, it's gonna be like a landmine. You're gonna like step on these issues, it's gonna blow up in your face, or you're gonna be walking and suddenly their issue just explodes all over you, and you just like experience all that kind of stuff on each other, right? And then if you take that where it's like not just you and one other person, but it's like 8 people, you're just exploding issues all over each other, okay? And it's just a mess. What do we call that? Call that drama, right? You have drama in your friend groups. If you try to take ownership in a relationship, you're going to discover in every person you meet, there are these personal issues, these character flaws, these sins that make it really difficult to get close to someone. Ideally, okay, like we're all a mix of good and bad, right? But ideally, like we would be lovable, pleasant people. But the truth is that inside of you, there is something inside of you that actually makes you kind of unlovable. That's the truth. And it prevents us from having close relationships. I think for a lot of us, we are more in love with close relationships as a concept, and we don't actually know how to relate to people face to face in real life. So we give a lot of lip service to community and words like close relationships, but when it actually comes to like taking ownership over each other, we don't do that. Right? So a lot of people, like when they actually start doing that, and when they actually encounter these deeper issues, it's like what Jazz shared, like I'm dip, like forget this. And a lot of times what happens is we get so fixated on why it's so hard to get close to the other person, that we never turn the mirror around and look at ourselves and say, there's something about me that's unlovable. And as a result, a lot of us are lonely. A lot of us experience frequent loneliness. And that's the problem that everyone's talking about in America, right? It's like lonely. Like I was listening to a podcast the other day, this professor from NYU talking about like what's going on with his younger generation, and he was talking about like all kinds of problems. Like I just wanted to, it's one of those podcasts where you just feel like, okay, it's hopeless. Let's just like nuke everything, forget it. But actually it was really surprising. He said the number one problem is loneliness. I was like, whoa, loneliness. But what if loneliness is not the problem? What if loneliness is a symptom of a deeper problem? Why do I have relationships that break down? Why is it that it doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is, it has the potential to break down? Why am I the kind of person that others don't want to be close to? Or maybe I'm just really good at hiding that part of me. But if people really knew what was inside of me, I wouldn't want to get close to me either, right? When we begin to ask these kinds of questions, that's where a lot of people get stuck. But that's the point where God comes in. When you get stuck there, that's when you realize, I think I need God. And there's a lot of public intellectuals today who are realizing like that very lesson. Andrew Huberman, a PhD neurologist from Stanford, He's like the king of hacks, like body hacking, you know? He like talks about working out and like hacking dopamine and like he uses science to basically like optimize everything about himself, including his relationships, maximum human thriving. Not religious. In a recent podcast, he said, I've started to pray. And I think I believe in God. And the guy's like, why? And he says, because there are just some things I can't hack, no matter how hard I try. So the ultimate message of Christianity, which we're going to watch in this video, it's 7 minutes long. It's actually a video that Jamie and I produced way back. And when I was preparing this, I was like, oh, I don't have to pre-preach this. I already made a video on it. It's a video about why am I so lonely? And essentially the answer is all of our alienation we experience with other people, it's tied to our alienation with God. Loneliness is not the problem. Sin is the problem. Loneliness is a symptom of sin. And if you want to mend your relationship with people, you need to get right with God first. Let's go and watch that video, and then I'll close things up after that. Voice, like you need to have a voice. Expressiveness in your voice, like you need to have a voice.
This is like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Hi.
Okay.
Loneliness is a big issue among college students today. But what if we told you loneliness is not the problem?
What if loneliness is a symptom of a deeper problem? One that isn't solved by having more likes or followers on Instagram.
Welcome to A2CN Studio. My name is Steven.
And I'm Jamie, and today we're addressing the topic of loneliness.
Now, in no way are we trying to trivialize the issue of loneliness. There's plenty of good things we can do to make our society less isolating. But what if there's something more fundamental to this problem of loneliness?
The Bible speaks of something else as the root cause of our loneliness. In Genesis 1, the Bible tells us that God created the heavens and the earth. And there's a phrase that repeats over and over again in this creation account. God saw that it was good.
The one thing God notes is not good is that man is alone. So he creates for man a helper, woman. Now, that probably sparks a lot of questions for you, which we don't have time to get into right now. But if you're interested, click on the top left for a more in-depth study of Genesis 2 with our good friend Joe.
But the main point of Genesis 2:18 is this: we were created for relationships. It's fundamental to who we are.
But what happens to our relationships? For one reason or another, our relationships break down. And to depict that, let's watch this short film.
Oh yeah, I can't even see.
I think one thing this short really captures well is this idea that every relationship can break down. There's no relationship that's immune to this. One thing we know intuitively is that the more significant the relationship, the bigger impact it has on your life when it's broken. It's like when you get in a fight with a friend, it just really messes up the rest of your day. You're just sort of like grumpy and sad, and sometimes you don't even know why, until you finally sit down and you talk with a friend to work things out. I think another thing that the film captures really well is how broken relationships lead to loneliness. When he deletes that first photo, it's like, what's going on?
In doing that, where does he find himself? Ultimately, he's alone with his phone. The whole film, he's by himself, and that shows how estranged and distant he's become from everyone. Now, these two universal experiences, the ripple effect of a significant but broken relationship and the isolation that it leads to, actually summarizes pretty well what the Bible describes as our condition. According to the Bible, the most important relationship for every person is our relationship with God. He's the one who made us and loves us more than any other person could ever love us.
We rejected God and separated ourselves from him, and now our relationship with God is broken.
And the immediate consequences of that broken relationship with God are profound. Genesis 3:7 says, "Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths."
We'll only be able to cover this briefly, but again, if you're interested in more, click on the top left corner for another short Bible study on this verse. Basically, what's happening here is that as a result of rejecting God, Adam and Eve experienced shame for the first time.
And all of that guilt and shame is experienced as nakedness. I mean, before this, Adam and Eve were naked, meaning they were completely open, known, unashamed, and at rest with each other. But now, because of their guilt and shame, they feel the need to hide and to cover themselves, as if to protect themselves from the gaze of God and of each other.
Verse 8 says, "And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord." Before, Adam and Eve were completely secure in the love of God, but now they're hiding from him. It's like that moment when the goofy, fun-loving child turns into an insecure, angsty teenager around middle school, and the parents who love this child suddenly find themselves distant and estranged, and they have no idea why.
And that picture really captures what our fundamental issue and our condition is. The Bible says that our most important relationship, our relationship with God, is broken. And now we're alienated from him. We're plagued with a sense of personal inadequacy. Like Adam and Eve, we begin to manufacture fig leaf coverings, masks that we carefully craft for different social settings. And while we might succeed in fooling others with our well-managed image, inside that inner loneliness grows because we know that no one really knows us.
In fact, having worn so many different masks before different audiences, we eventually find ourselves asking, who am I? We've become lost, strangers even to ourselves. And that's the situation we find ourselves in.
Now, in response, we can try a lot of different things, and they might help for a while. Most of us have experienced the excitement of a new friendship or getting a lot of likes on social media. But at the end of the day, we know that there's a loneliness inside that lingers with us, even if we have all of that.
What we need to get at is how we can mend our broken relationship with God.
We'll be continuing our series on loneliness. We hope that you'll join us. Thank you, and see you next week.
See you next week.
So for context, during COVID, when everything was shut down, Jamie and I and a bunch of the people here actually, we started something called A2CN, Acts2 Campus Network, and we just did we made vlogs, we did a YouTube variety show and stuff like that, answering questions about Christianity. So you could actually find out all on YouTube if you want to look it up, A2CN Studio. So the main point, right? The main claim of Christianity is that all of our alienation with other people can be traced back to our alienation from God, right? And the fundamental question we need to answer is, how then do I mend my broken relationship with God, right? And once you deal with that, you must deal with that question if you want to deal with the question of close relationships. How do I get close? And I want to encourage you to get that question answered. Now, some of you are still wondering whether or not you have that question answered. You're still wondering, how do I get close to people, right? And how do I be that friend that sticks closer than a brother? What does that look like? Well, I want to share on that with you guys, and we're going to end with I'm not going to dive deep into it today. We're going to unpack this in the weeks to come. But this verse here, Ephesians 4:25, this is the goal of Christian community, right? Let's read it together. 1, 2, 3. Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. So the picture of community that's depicted here is one of openness and honesty, right? And that's what we want. That's what we want at the table. That's the goal of Christian relationships. It's Ephesians 4:25, right? That's the goal. And we want to sit at the table of openness and honesty with a fellow Christian. So let's say these are chairs, okay? Because you're meeting with another person, and this is the table of openness and honesty. Now, in order to relate with one another in the church with openness and honesty, there are 4 elements that we need, right? And you don't have to do these 4 elements every time, but the claim here is that in any open and close relationship, you're going to find these 4 components. You're going to find these 4 components in any close relationship. And I'm just going to go over them very briefly. The first component is that you meet up. And you meet up regularly, all right? This sounds really basic, but like Sam said, if you're not present, like no one can get close to you, right? So if you don't actually like intentionally meet up with people, and you hope to just bump into them, like that might work at college to an extent, but like you actually have to intentionally, like you can live with people, as Sam clearly pointed out, you can live with people and not feel close to them, right? So even with people you live with, like you got to meet up with them. And there's a lot of internal, external reasons why that doesn't happen. But the verse that really captures this in the Bible is Hebrews 10:24-25. It says, "Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." So the Bible knows that it's easy for us to neglect meeting up. And so the Bible says, let's meet up. Let's not neglect this very basic step to growing close with each other. And instead, we need to meet up so that we can strive for an ultimate picture of closeness in Acts 2. I'm not going to get into that today. We'll get into that later. The second component is that you talk about life. My handwriting's terrible, sorry. Talk about life. It's really easy after you meet up to just talk about all kinds of things. You could talk about like the weather, you could talk about politics, you could talk about technology, you could talk about Taylor Swift. It's just really easy to talk, but not actually talk about things where you actually get to get close with someone. The ultimate thing you need to talk about is like some stuff that self-discloses. Like you're talking about life, you're talking about like my upbringing, you're talking about my family, you're talking about things that I really care about right now, my goals, my aspirations, my fears, my beliefs, things I'm struggling with. You have to talk about life. And there's a lot of, it's different to just kind of talk about nothing versus talk about life. I'm not going to belabor that, but I think you guys get the idea. The third component is prayer. Pray. Prayer, I think, is a shortcut to growing close with people. But in prayer, in Christian relationships, that's when we bring God into the relationship. And I get to bring you to God, and you get to bring me to God. And God, who knows us both, is able to draw us together. Prayer is like this shortcut. And the Bible constantly commands us to pray for each other, and we're going to get into that. James 5:16 says that we ought to pray one another because the prayer of a righteous person has great power as it's working. So there's a picture there of like people praying for each other. And Ephesians 6:18 says, praying at all times in the Spirit, with all prayer and supplication, we make supplication for all the saints. This idea of praying for each other. And then finally, you ask for help. Asking for help. Galatians 6:2, I don't have that verse, says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Asking for help doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be about like an addiction like we saw in the video. It could be as mundane as going, hey, I can't wake up for Sunday service. Can you give me a call and make sure I wake up, right? Or, hey, I need a ride. Can I get a ride? You know, the way our modern society has set itself up is that you don't need to ask each other for help anymore. Because with Uber and DoorDash and things like that, like you can get everything yourself, right? And in the name of convenience, we've destroyed a lot of avenues to closeness and relationship. We're not used to asking each other for help anymore, but this is one of the biggest ways that we get close to one another. So again, we're going to unpack this more in the coming weeks, but in any close relationship, you will find these 4 components. What I want to ask you guys is, I want you to grade yourself. Not grade yourself, just assess yourself, all right? Which one of these components is missing in your relationships? Because if the one that's missing is probably a big reason why you're not able to get close to people, right? So yeah, maybe it's a lack of meeting up. Some of us are in different seasons of life and things are busy and stuff like that, you know, but so we're talking about like overall trends. We're talking about big patterns, you know, habits you have. Maybe you don't like to talk about life. You don't like to talk about the deeper things. You don't like to talk about yourself. You just want to keep things at the Taylor Swift level, Talk about sports all the time or Marvel. Maybe you don't really pray. Like you have Christian friends, but it's not really elevating each other. You're not lifting each other up to greater zeal and sacrifice for God. You're actually kind of dragging each other down. Prayer is a great way to deal with that. Or maybe you never ask for help. You're never willing to be vulnerable. You're never willing to be needy. You're completely self-sufficient. But as a result, your life doesn't impact anyone's and no one impacts your life. Yeah, we need to grow in some self-awareness to understand, like, even though these seem so simple, it's not easy, right? But at least with this picture, this tool, we have a way of becoming that friend that sticks closer than a brother. So we're going to talk about this more in the coming weeks. And next week, I'm going to especially talk about the church and the picture of the church that God intended and how close relationships get formed in the church and how they get blocked in the church. And I know when it comes to the word church, a lot of us have a lot of different experiences, a lot of different hang-ups and baggage that come into play there. And that's all really important. But we're going to look at what the Bible says about church and close relationships. Then the week after that, I want to talk about what I think is the greatest threat to connecting with people. I think the biggest problem to connecting with people. And after that, we're going to talk about mission. One of the things that is not captured here is mission and why mission is important to closeness. And so I hope you're excited. I want to give you guys homework. All right? We're going to concretely apply this. What I would like to ask you guys is, many of you have been coming on Sundays, and you come and you know people and stuff like that, but there isn't like an intentionality to get to know the people around here. And so what I would want to encourage you guys to do is find someone, when I close this message, when I close announcements, okay? Find someone you don't really know, get their number, or IG, okay? And we're going to go same gender for this one, all right? Just, it's not, okay, anyway. This series is not about romantic relationships, okay? It's about, so same gender, find someone you don't really know, exchange numbers, meet up one time this week, grab a meal, just talk about life, okay? Go through family, upbringing, background, all that kind of stuff, okay? And if it has to be over Zoom or you're not, if you're online, whatever, like we can make that work. It's okay. Like face-to-face is ideal, but thank God we have like FaceTime and things like that. But don't settle for that, okay? If you can meet face-to-face, try face-to-face. So that's my homework for you guys, okay? Let me pray for us. Father, I just want to pray for our church. It says in your word, 1 John, it says that God is love. And whoever does not love his brother and says he claims to know God does not really know God. Love, closeness should characterize Christians above all, because we believe we've been loved by the love of God. We believe that the love of Jesus Christ has changed us and saved us. And so we should, of all people, have the closest relationships, have the most vibrant community, care for each other the most. God, we confess we fall short of that standard all the time, and there's so many different reasons and so many different obstacles to that. But even if we're not Christian, we also face these problems of knowing a lot of people, being a man of many companions, but not having anyone that sticks close to their brother. We experience the problem of our sin, that there are things about us that make it hard for other people to get close to us. So God, I just hope that through this series, one, we would all be helped towards close relationships, and two, through that, we would come to know you. And our most important relationship, our relationship with you, God, would be mended. I pray that the blessing of that mended relationship would ripple out to the rest of our life. We pray all this in Jesus' name.